Okay, so Tekken 8 just got another update, which was obviously very frequent, and I've already talked about the patch notes themselves, so I'm not going to sit here and read through another 8 pages of hitbox changes and bug fixes. Instead, there is something else about this update that I think is a lot more interesting, and that is the direction Tekken 8 seems to be heading in. Because if you actually look at what Bandai is changing, they have lowered everyone's health, they have made quick recovery worse, they have specifically talked about moves having too much reward for the amount of risk involved. For the quick recovery part, I kind of think is also good too, but I guess we'll get into that later. And then there is this massive list of hitbox tracking and consistency fixes across the roster, and it got me thinking, is Tekken 8 actually heading in the right direction now? Because Tekken 8 has been out for a while at this point. We have been through the launch version of the game, multiple seasons, major balance changes, new characters, system changes, and I think we have got a pretty good idea now of what works in Tekken 8 and what doesn't. So let's talk about it. The first thing that stood out to me about the latest patch is that this isn't really some massive character balance patch. There are balance changes. Bryan gets touched, Nina gets touched, Kazuya, Leroy and Lili get adjustments, but most of the character changes are actually fixes. Moves whiffing when they are not supposed to, moves hitting people behind the character when they are not supposed to, tracking behaving strangely, strike throws not activating, moves interacting incorrectly with attack reversals. And honestly, I don't mind that, because not every Tekken update needs to completely change the tier list. Sometimes I would rather they just make the game more consistent. If I sidestep something correctly, I want my sidestep to actually matter. If an attack is supposed to connect, I don't want it randomly whiffing because my character is standing half an inch to the left. Those things might not make exciting patch notes, but they make the game better. And looking through this update, Bandai clearly seems aware that these weird interactions are a problem. But then we get to the changes that are much more interesting. Maximum health has gone from 200 to 190, and I have been thinking about this one quite a bit, because Tekken 8 has never exactly been a game where people complain that rounds take too long. Well, maybe in the beginning. It is already explosive. You make one bad decision, get launched, get carried to the wall, and suddenly you are looking at your health bar wondering where your life went. So reducing everyone's health is an interesting decision. 10 health isn't going to suddenly transform the entire game. We are talking about a 5% reduction, but Tekken is a game where tiny differences matter. There are going to be situations where you would have survived before, and now you don't. There are going to be rounds where one extra poke would have previously been required, and now the round is already over. So I am a little bit mixed on this, because if one of the criticisms of Tekken 8 is that the game can feel overly explosive and heavily focused on offense, does giving everybody less health really help that? I'm not completely convinced. At the same time, I can understand the other argument. More health does not necessarily create better Tekken. You don't want people surviving forever just because everyone has gigantic health bars. And if Bandai wants rounds to remain quick and exciting while addressing the actual offensive tools causing problems, maybe lowering health isn't automatically a bad thing. But it is definitely something I'm watching, because Tekken 8 did not need help making mistakes hurt. They already hurt, and I mean that because it did a lot. And this is where just the update starts making a little more sense to me. Quick recovery now takes 5 frames longer. Previously, you were -2 on block, now you're on -7. and on hit you were previously +3, now you are actually -2. That is a pretty substantial change to the situation, and this feels much more connected to one of the things Bandai talks about in the patch notes: risk versus reward. Because one of my biggest questions with Tekken 8 has always been, how much should the game protect you from making the wrong decision? And how much should the opponent actually be rewarded for putting you into a bad situation? There is obviously a balance there. You don't want someone getting knocked down once and basically putting the controller down because the round is over. But you also do not want defensive recovery options being so good that there is barely any consequences to choosing them. So making quick recovery less advantageous means you have got to think a little bit more about when you are actually using it. And that is the kind of change that, quite frankly, I like. Not necessarily because quick recovery specifically needed to be destroyed, but because I like the idea of Tekken making decisions matter. Although some say that the quick recovery is much better than the last time, but each to their own. There is one line from Bandai's explanation that stood out to me more than anything else in these patch notes. They said they reviewed moves that had a high impact on the competitive environment where there were problems with their risk-reward balance, and they want to expand the options available to both offense and defense. That is exactly what I want them looking at, because I don't think Tekken 8's problem is simply offense is bad. Tekken should have strong offense. It should feel good when you make the right read. It should feel good when you condition somebody and then completely destroy them for making the wrong decision. That is Tekken. My issue is when the reward is massive, but the risk is barely there. If I'm throwing out an incredibly strong option and you make the correct defensive read, you should get something for that. Otherwise, why would I stop doing it? And that is where I think Tekken 8 can sometimes become frustrating. Not because somebody is attacking you, but because it can sometimes feel like you are taking too much bigger risks trying to defend when they are trying to attack. Look at Bryan in this update. One of his moves has gone from +5 on block to +1. The chip damage has also gone from 6 to 4. Now, I'm not saying Bryan is suddenly terrible. He is obviously not. And +1 is still +1. But look at the philosophy behind that change. At +5, Bryan has a lot of control over what happens next. You blocked his attack, but you were still dealing with a very strong situation afterwards. At +1, Bryan still gets an advantage. The move hasn't been made useless, but the defender has more room to actually interact with what happens next. That is what I think Bandai means when they are talking about expanding the mind game for both offense and defense. And I'd rather see more changes like that than this move does 10 less damage now, because you are not removing what makes the character strong. You are changing how much freedom they get for using that strength. And I think this is important. Whenever we talk about reducing aggression in Tekken 8, I don't want Bandai to misunderstand that as make Tekken 8 play exactly like Tekken 7. No, I don't want that. If I wanted to play Tekken 7, then I would play Tekken 7. Tekken 8 needs its own identity. Heat is actually just part of that. Aggression is actually just part of that. The faster pace is just actually part of that. Characters feeling powerful is just part of that. I don't want Bandai to spend the next year slowly removing everything that makes Tekken 8 different until we are basically playing Tekken 7 with better graphics. The question is, can you keep Tekken 8 aggressive without making defense feel miserable? That is the balance I think they need to find. And I think that is much harder than simply buffing or nerfing a few characters. For me, good Tekken happens when both players feel like they are just making decisions. I'm attacking, you are defending. I'm thinking about what you are going to do. You are thinking about what I am going to do. I adapt, you adapt. That is where Tekken literally becomes addictive. The problem is when one side of the interaction becomes so powerful that the other player's decision barely matters. And I think that is why things like tracking and hitboxes are actually important. Look at how many moves in this update had their hitboxes reduced against opponents standing behind the character. That is not flashy. Nobody is making a 10-minute YouTube video screaming they reduced the rear hitbox. But think about what that actually means. You successfully get round an attack, and the attack shouldn't magically vacuum you back into it. If you made the right movement decision, the game should recognize that. That is good defensive design, and there are loads of fixes like that in this patch. So this is where I'm kind of conflicted, because I like a lot of what Bandai is, in quotations, saying. Risk and reward, more options in the mind game, fixed unintended tracking, fixing attacks whiffing, making defensive decisions matter. All of that sounds great, but then 190 health, and I'm sitting here thinking, hang on, we are trying to improve the balance between offense and defense, so we are making everybody die faster? I'm going to need some time with that one. Maybe it works. Maybe the combination of all these changes makes perfect sense once we have played the patch for a while. But on paper, that is the one decision where I'm still asking, why? Because if damage and explosive rounds are already part of the conversation surrounding Tekken 8, I am not sure reducing health is the solution that I would have chosen. Something else I have also been thinking about is whether this is actually how Bandai should handle Tekken balancing going forward. Smaller adjustments, fix weird interactions, target a few genuinely problematic moves, see what happens, then adjust again. Because we have seen what happens when developers make enormous balance changes. You fix one problem and accidentally create 5 new ones. Then everybody spends the next month arguing about the new broken character. With this patch, Bryan gets a meaningful nerf. Nina loses some counter hit behavior. Some other specific interactions are toned down. Then there is a huge amount of cleanup across the roster. That is actually not a terrible approach, especially if Bandai keeps doing it regularly. The important part is that they actually do keep doing it, because small changes only work if you are willing to follow them up. I think mostly yes anyways, and I say mostly for a reason. I really like that Bandai is openly talking about risk versus reward. Bryan is still strong as shit though, and so is Nina, but I like that they have started to look at situations where the defender isn't being given enough options. I like seeing tracking and hitbox problems being cleaned up. And I like that they haven't looked at strong characters and immediately decided, right, let's just destroy them. Bryan going from +5 to +1 is a perfect example. You are weakening a strong situation without deleting the move. That's actually a sensible approach in balancing. Where I'm still unsure though is the system level direction. Tekken 8 is already explosive, and reducing health from 200 to 190 potentially makes that even more noticeable. So I don't think Bandai has solved Tekken 8. Nowhere near it, not even close. But I do think this patch shows that they are looking at some of the right problems, and that is probably more important than whether your main gained or lost 2 frames in literally one update. The real test is going to be what happens next. If Bandai keeps looking at risk versus reward, keeps improving movement interactions, keeps fixing moves that track when they should not, and keeps giving defenders meaningful answers without completely killing Tekken 8's aggressive identity, then yeah, I think the game could be heading somewhere really good. But if we just keep reducing health or adding more and more offensive power, then we are going to be having this exact same conversation again. So I'm curious of what you guys think. Is Tekken 8 actually better now than it was before? And more importantly, what would you actually want to change about Tekken 8 right now? Would you reduce the damage? Would you buff movement, change heat, bring health back to 200? Or do you think the game is already moving in the right direction? Let me know down below, because I'm genuinely interested to see where people stand on this. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe for more Tekken 8, and I'll catch you in the next one.